That would help. Okay, mic test, mic test. Hmm.
예, 대니 디셉 좀 난디 자모 나와십시오. 주기 남정기 등에들 라님 버립 소송이. 대니 단디 감 디캅텔 단데니 가츠 공도랑지 셰차송. 대니 본좀 속바 nga 이거니네 랑지도 공도 셰트브레. 대니들이 마 담보 대니디 디지텔라 상기 좀 난디테 당연전텔라 냠직시 송송혀레. 티셉 좀 단디 자모 나와지 샤비 추기 남랑게 당연들라 냠버 육소 송 가립시니 상집 좀 단디 당연들라 냠버 육구 요래 디캅들라 제나네 드닌디 오그님 종규르거 대상디 과 히럽기 냠보 저와당 뜰은지 고니 마음 종구 요래 딥셔나 당업 상집 좀 단디 코랑이 당연들라 육니 드니 디고니 드니 코르탐집 신기라 반다오지 시송아 디체들이 딥시나 디체 좀 단디 잠모나와지 송니는 단델라 잠모당 나와서 지금와 대치고고 그요래 잠모세한테 다 동반이 끼돈 대세기요래 추탐치 기르닐 동반이 끼돈 대세기요래 영나더니 정그 샘기르닐 대세기요래 잠모세한테 잠모지 바데 가르제나는 리하고 지그 고니 하장 그 잠모 임비셔나 똑가와 이래 리하고 지그 똑똑그 요 말에 드리 임비션도 니짱 잠모 임비셔나는 드니 잠모스 나와지 샤와제나는 테타우 잠모 텔람 냠버 적버 셰피 유르첸거 당연전 텔라 잠모 나와제 키오레 인데 유르첸거 히럽 텔라 나와제 그래 디셔나 돌라 유르첸이가 예르메티켜 송와테 히럽 테당 추기르양 테니가 에르메티큐르 송라 잠모 나와 송 오테타우 테니 당엔전 텔람 냠적 시송 송레 상기 텔람 냠버 juk 송 송레 테레 따테 캐랑수 삼로도나 상기 디니 값수 냠적 시송 제나 테인나 상기 냠버 마브적 보니 값 요르베 삼나 요마레 상기 차님 송테 뚜딱도 당엔전 징알리 요와 직당 쇼lâm 가립식 구나양 요와 요마레 옛나야 드시 캄라 뚜나는 참참라 때다고 넘줄 떴나 드샤 남라 판톡 요래 쳇도샤위 드샤 대랑달라 요빈 코르 탐쳇 요라와 공고 꿈들라 요비 공고 꿈들라 요빈 코르 탐쳇 그 ndni 팔루 그 남귤라 따나 오레다 공급식 땅땅 루보파 남귤돈 땅땅 깡치 타니 삼로 땅나 콩땅엔 zel람 냠적 시송 삼야 때요레 어때리 치니 드르샤 남기 ngో라 구책 광가 똥해요레스 어디리레
Continuing with the text, it says, "At that time, the transcendent and accomplished conqueror was resting evenly in the meditative absorption of the enumerations of phenomena known as profound perception." So we, up to this point, then we had the preliminary introduction providing historical context. And it showed that through the 5 excellent circumstances. And then the next sort of action, we could say, in sort of quotes, that takes place for the teaching to occur as it does, is that then the Buddha, the transcendent and accomplished conqueror Bhagavan, was resting evenly in meditative absorption. And this is because the way in which this teaching, called the Heart Sutra, the teachings on the perfection of wisdom, Prajnaparamita, comes about is through a question and answer that takes place within the presence of the Buddha in his retinue. And so, through the power of the Buddha's presence, sitting in meditative equipoise, that sort of that power to effect, what's often translated as blessings, then enabled that to come about, the power to effect of his presence in meditation. And then that meditation is described as being one that is a meditative absorption of the enumerations of phenomena, basically of all phenomena, known as profound perception. And so there's 2 words here. There's the word profound and the word perception. Profound is indicating the ultimate meaning of emptiness. Emptiness that is the natural state, the nature of all phenomena. And that meaning is profound, and being profound is not one that can easily be realized. And so it's called profound. And then the perception, then profound perception. Perception is from the perspective of the perceiver, the one who is experiencing this profundity, who is resting in that state of meditative evenness or equipoise, and directly experiencing that profound nature. And so then it's called the profound perception, the perceiver and perceived. Or we could say the indivisible nature of perceiver and perceived, a profound wisdom. Or we could say then the basic space of all phenomena. Essentially, the Buddha was resting in the direct experience of true nature. Of course, this then causes one to wonder, this may cause one to wonder or to think, well, does that mean that there is a time when the Buddha is not resting in that recognition of true nature and what we call meditative equipoise, and then a time when he is, like a before and after? From the perspective of the Buddha, because as defined as what a Buddha is always resting in the natural state, never wavers from, never is in or out of the direct experience of true nature. However, from the perspective of those who perceive and are relating to a Buddha, such as the Buddha Shakyamuni, it appears that the Buddha sometimes walks around and moves and is engaged in activities, and then sometimes that the Buddha is sitting and meditating. And so, from the perspective of beings to be guided by an enlightened being, then we talk about, oh, the Buddha was resting in meditative absorption of the true nature phenomena, or we say, oh, the Buddha was speaking or walking, and so forth. But we shouldn't think then that by speaking in these ways on a relative basis about the way things appear, that means there's ever a time where the Buddha is not resting in the realization of true nature. But there are times where that serves a purpose. For example, that his hands are in the gesture of meditative equipoise, and it looks like the Buddha is sitting in meditation, and so then that's what is being conveyed here. So,
되리. 되니 다 때리. 되니 주기 남노기 당간절라 녀버 육소 소래. 되니 양 뒤제 샹치 생활 생활 보고 제몸 보고 샹에서 함숙경 계획 파르투 셴바 잠무 쇼바니 말나 마타장 봉하고 대덕랑랑 기동한 넘버 따오 손에 다 뒤제 되니 샹치 생활 샹에서 양 다 상지 그 신랍 그 또지 샹에서 양 대마 탁도 아 냠식 그 당연절라 육송송 그래. 단대 gem천치기 오래 가르레제는 느니마 럼밥진도 가렉송 그래제나 qalanga 홍와제 때용 그래. qalang지 폰숨 쪽바 nga 담비고니 공도 로차르와 드리 그 폰숨 쪽바 nga 요피 디캅 데라 다 원하 되는디 추드 히럽냥 보디 흥우집 조샤트 송구 그요나 다 간립신이 송그요레스 다 때마 럼밥진도 qalanga 홍용 그요레 든드니 마름밥진도 낑기고니 다 간립신이 송송즈데 단디나라 캐랑스 따다 종근나라 데니 하리우 샹리즈글라 저와 딜렌시닝고 담주고아터 마토코마 상지근고서 송송한다고 지기 요 말에 딥셔나네 데니 상지급 신럽기 또기 송땅요레 공구샤르 무숙 송고가 말에 회나 상지기 꾸입신기라비 과당 송급신기라비 과당 툭깁신기라비 과제요레 더니 ndorde 삽지와제 지교레 ndorde 삽지와제 ndorde 삽지위 ndorde 때 상지가 과레제나 레 옛날 때 상지가 야르니 송아지나 마레 때더니 상지가 꾸입신기라비 과레 회나 샹칩생화 도르지 냥보 말에 도지 갸르포 인사래 샹칩생화 도지 갸르포 집샤와 때 상지 그 식대 고톡랍지네 식 고톡랍지 비 또블랍 때니는 더니 공금도 차상 되지않니 송송 더는 날 꾸입신기랍비 과래 대빈도 송급신기랍비 과양 요래 더 강래제나네 잠비기 영어로 와가지고 만주시 샹칩생화 잠비 영어제 때고 그래 샹칩생화 잠비 영때 데라 마르키비 마르키 다자치 요래 게로 마르키 다자치 디 인조파 세르시피 인도 요래 팀도 디말라 마르키비
Yupa Selvar
인조파 세르시피 인도제 요래
Okay.
팀도 요래 디 팀도데 상징우고 송마레 야르니 잠비양 케랑크 송혹스 콩고 꽉나위 톱진 잠비양 그 송송 ndo 차상 숑레 가르테 상지 급신지 랍 메나네 샹주 생활 도르지 겨보당 샹주 생활 잠비르니까 라양 데타우 송터야 요 마르스 드리 용요레 다 툭기 신지 랍비 과제테 히릅 냥보타고 있나 툭기 신지 랍비 과레 땅엔진기 툭 따땅나 따비 고니 바로 부테니테 송터케요레 드리 지글라제키요레스
Mm. Mm. Didn't get a what? I'm looking at my dictionary. Didn't get it.
마르키다레 네
That's all.
마르키다테레
So as we continue, then this teaching comes about through the power of the presence of the Buddha resting in meditative equipoise. And that becomes a kind of the condition in which then Avalokiteshvara has a profound insight, and then the following Shariputra is moved to then ask the question, and through this conversation of question and answer, this teaching comes about. So first we have, for example, we have then the preliminary introduction providing the historical context. Then we have this condition of the Buddha in meditative absorption and the conditions that caused the teaching to come about. And so, like, why did that teaching happen? Why did the teaching of the Heart Sutra occur? And how did it come about? And so that's what this, then the further words are describing, the sort of like the catalyst or the conditions. And one was the Buddha resting in meditative equipoise, and the other then was then in his presence, and through that power of the presence, what we call the blessings of that, then Shariputra was moved to ask a question of Avalokiteshvara, who was then able to answer it. And so when we talk about the sutras, we say the words of the Buddha, not all of them were directly spoken by the Buddha, but there are part of the Buddhist canon is a collection of teachings that came about in different ways through the power of the different qualities of the Buddha, and that's what we call the blessings of the Buddha. And so we can say some of the sutras are considered words of the Buddha that came about through the blessings, the power of the presence of its enlightened form. And others are words of the Buddha that came about through the blessings of his enlightened speech. And others are words of the Buddha that came about through enlightened mind. And they're all considered to be of the sutras. For example, there is a sutra in the Buddhist canon, the words of the Buddha, that is called the Sutra of the 10 Bhumis, the 10 levels of realization of a bodhisattva. And that is considered a sutra and the words of the Buddha, but the Buddha did not speak those words. And so the category is considered to be the words of the Buddha that came about through the blessings of his enlightened form. And the sutra itself was spoken by a bodhisattva called Vajragyalpo. And so then he, apparently, the Buddha placed his hand on the crown of the head of this bodhisattva, and based upon that, he suddenly was able to and gave this sutra. From beginning to end, he spoke all the words of the sutra. And so we would call that then blessings through the words of the Buddha through the power of the blessings of his form, his physical form. And then an example of the words of the Buddha that come about through the blessings of the enlightened speech would be, for example, like the Bodhisattva Manjushri, very specifically not the deity, but the Bodhisattva Manjushri. And he then gave a teaching to the king Ajatasattu, Ajatasatru. And this is called the sutra that dispels regret. Again, it wasn't literally spoken by the mouth of the Buddha. Manjushri gave that teaching at the behest of the Buddha. And the Buddha said to him, give this teaching, or, and directed him to teach. And then when he spoke, that's the sutra that came. The sutra that dispels that dispels regrets. And so then that, again, was due to then the Buddha's speech. So we would call that the words of the Buddha through the blessings of the Buddha's speech. And then there's this. We have that sutra by Vajragyalpo that came about in that way. We have the sutra by Manjushri, the Bodhisattva Manjushri came about this way. And then this one is one that is considered the words of the Buddha through the power of the presence of his enlightened mind. And so he was resting in that meditative equipoise of that profound nature, and his mind sort of focused its intent. And through the power of the presence of that, then the teaching came about right there in his presence, as we'll see. Maso?
Teri, teni 다 때니라고 그래. 때니 계란수 가수 삼로다나 때 간립신이 종해요. 앞사면라고 요래. 옛날에 길긴 때문에 망보 촉나네. 무부 누바제 때 삼기 맥혀파래. 딥셔나 용구요래. 상기제 때 방샤 차창방 똑샤 탐치 똑사리 강석치글라 제케요래. 상기 삼기 맥혀파 망보 요촉래. 아 되니 나초용 차창마 되니 대 상기 탐칸내레지나 탐체 상기 탑거래 상 야롱래 나초 있나 김성 강래제나 나초라 대병셔비 냥보요래 나초 열라 딥셔나는 나초 차상 상기 탑야가 상기 롱야래 가르테 상기 송나 강석직 상기 송나 회나 소수 개월라 소수 개우 누바직 요래 회나 소수 개워 직 파르카니 콜라 제와직 딱해요 나양 디 누바 케랑라 랩그래 회나 드니 턱 랑보요 나양 그 하거나 그 가글 회나 카르쇼니 카브르 끄능라 쿄라더니 지금 nga chola ga khyo zayanda wo chi lap jang nga cho hali pa tin sem nang la nuhuk thep do bi yore thana nam gyur chi ngak la yang nu pa tin yore yang na nam gyur kerang ke mik rik song na hwena mo jamba pa ta na yang tin nam gyur la ten ni rong lu bo sem ka na la chora dam na cho ma yong gu do ga de yong gu do ku gem sang ga re je na te tem je de ngu bu nu ba ri 바로 부가서 그 누박이 됐다고 가서 이러한 거요. 대비신동 같은 잠보랑 그 사람 독독인데 양네 무부 누밥 삼기만 잡비 고니 남카 동반인 것도 누구래. 쇼식니 삼로 땅나 얌살고래. 대남진디 썩한 낙찰 강 있나요? 라나 소소라 누바다 훅직요래. 회나 형니가 냠도 깨해요나 고니가 데이지 탁녀온다고 했나 형직 그 누바가 형직 그 란게르와도 그요래 제기노가 산익 바남기 때 제기요래 고니 투기오 마다 짜와 투고 말 야카 투고 말 로마 투고 말 깎게 투고 말해 때 옛날 띠 누바제야 띠 그런 거 톱그 드립신이 온거요래 회나 아주 만칭 동나양 때래 펠 총총 직잡이나 띠 누바 간에 나오지 못도 다동 샘급 삼로 땅땅 잠바직 삼로 땅땅 찍시나 누바 대비신 띠요래 양 삼로 땅땅 잠바직랍 게르나양 누바 때타보요래 회나 게랑수 삼로 동땅 아주 얼만 짜와니니 መን큰 직라만 레제니 쫓나양 뭐마보 탓도그도가 날리 탓도가 마보요로 와 대장수
Right.
랍땅 징도가
Yeah.
나대 얌살 그것도 역회 역본도 삼거든요 디회 대초 게랑수디 샘 그냠는 땅 야르니 고알랭고 거리 너무 비중땅 더제나 때 코랑만 때 코랑 공올라 문이요 말에 깎게 코만 말에 옛날 양더니 코랑 날리 탔어 gemsen karin sem gnu bare the sem gnu bare
Mhm.
대 남신 ngubo kare kare 있나요 ngazu ngubu chuni ze tela teni 그 누바 쳔보 요래 딥셔나 초 소수 개워 임비니 갑나야 누바 만다바 요래 teni 양 샹초 생활 결송이 갑나 누바 만다바 착로 요래 대니 상기 톱소나 다 톨리 누훅 체후데레 가르 파지티브 그 누훅 체후데 상기라 요래 가르지나 똑반 다르신소 딥셔나 된 계랑 준더 따보시는데 빼 릴하보지 그래 상기람 촌나
Mhm.
더샤양 코랑 노 땅담바지 인구고래 다노 롱와지 된디 그때니 강사 차퍼와지 인구고래 대란드리시니 구입신기라 박 송구신기라 박 투깁신기라 박시나 신기랍 톱고요래 어 된디 신이 때니 ngu부 누바다 공동이 라베나 템르제야디 제야데 상로 땅고교래 어디리레스
So, whenever we consider anything, like taking into consideration these teachings, like how did they come about? They come about when the gathering of all causes and conditions are present, when the
No, no, no.
interdependence is
Tengwa ma.
there.
Yeah, yeah, it's okay.
When the
Yeah, yeah.
interdependence
Sangi 그
is there.
간접신이 들이 송토 그 요압 삼나. 데려와 말자.
Right. And
Uh-huh.
so then we're looking at then the interdependence for these specific teachings. The kind of principal one is the Buddha himself, and what a Buddha is: someone who has eliminated all that we wish to be free from, and who has fully realized all that can be realized by definition. And then anyone could become a Buddha. Anyone can be a Buddha because we are all Buddhable in that we have Buddha nature, which makes us, that means the nature of our mind is already that of a Buddha. And so we have the potential to realize it. And anyone who does is called a Buddha. And when we have realized it fully, then we have the power to effect of what all that constitutes being a Buddha. Everything has the power to effect. So, for example, as ordinary beings, we have a power to effect. Like if we give love to others, if in our mind we love others, they can be affected by that. Like if someone calls you on the phone from a whole other part of the earth and they say, I love you, I care about you, then that's the power to effect of their speech. Or if someone looks at us in a specific way, whatever the expression is, it has the power to affect us, whether positively or negatively. That's what we call dependent origination or interdependence, the power to affect, which is that one thing in dependence upon that, the power to affect that that has, the potential or capacity that that has, affects something else and something changes. And when we consider that in so many ways to kind of our ordinary perception, it is inconceivable, like all the sort of power to affect or and so forth of like the planet Earth, all the interdependence that that takes and what it can do and so forth. It's unbelievable. And every single thing on Earth has a power to affect. The forests, the mountains, each and every plant has its own power to effect. And that power to effect is such that it doesn't always appear to be that there's direct contact either. So you could have like two trees growing together, and then scientifically it can be observed that one tree is affecting the other, and yet their roots are not touching, their trunks are not touching, their branches are not touching, but there is a power to effect. There is a set of causes and conditions affecting the other, and that's its power to effect. Like, for example, if we have medicine and we take a pill and it cures us from a disease, that one round pill has that power to effect. Every single thing in the universe has the power to affect another and cause change in another that's, that corresponds to that thing. If we look at the power to effect of our mind, just take for example a situation like where we have an illness and we're given a placebo, a round pill made of sugar, and we think it's medicine, but it's actually not. And yet, what is the percentage of people who are cured from illnesses based on a placebo? It's quite high. Rinpoche said, I was very surprised when I heard that. And that's because of the power of the mind. The pill itself, that isn't medicine, is doing nothing. But the power of our mind to be cured from that belief and that experience is extraordinary. Some people have, been cured of diseases using placebos. And that's the power to effect of the mind itself. And so every single thing on earth has its own power to effect that corresponds to what it is in its circumstances. And so as ordinary beings, We have a
맞아.
certain capacity or a power to affect
네,
others.
너비 용직 나랑이 장게도.
I remember in the Buddhist
회나
texts,
칼라 있나요?
like food,
당연진기 지세요.
that we call one thing, we say the substance or the food of meditative absorption.
지구요 마
But there
당연진
doesn't
군급이
actually mean there's
또기
a food
루본
or
소예요.
an actual physical
그
substance, but
샘
that
그 누발.
meditative absorption itself can sustain a body at a certain level, and that it is
네.
feeding the body.
오케이. 데니 샘비지제 지겨래.
And then we have
샘비지제나
the substance
쌈크요
of
비지.
thought.
쌈두구나.
They call it the substance of thought. Okay?
yes. 데니 칼란 요래 쌈두구나
So
그거요 말.
sometimes when people think there
뒤진
is food,
소통기요.
they can
요
actually
말은
be
문입시나
sustained
요
on that. Actually, there isn't, but they think of it. It's called the
왜나
substance of mental thought. Food.
노치근나라 레와치기요래 계란라.
And
칼라
so
요래
we
노근나라.
think,
요
that
말.
there is food in this
옛날
container even when there's not.
유 주레와치아키요래. 디나라
And so
칼라 요
that
칼라 요
power
쌈.
of thought that thinks there is food
니마
can
카길란
actually
소통기요래.
sometimes cause someone to be able to survive for a certain number of days.
카르테 디나라 메파하코소나.
If they know that there's no food
샘그
there,
레와치아소니.
and then they no longer have the thought
커도래.
there's food,
무기
then
흑대 그거래.
they die of starvation.
데니지요래.
So when we talk about substances, we have like
데니지
potential.
선바테 가츠
The
칼라자
third is actual
아주
food.
칼라래.
So these are like called the three kinds of food. And the third is the actual food that we
That's a-
eat, the material food that we typically eat.
나 yum. So you like that one, food. You like most the third one, yeah? I wish you tried the first one.
So each and everything in the universe, its nature is such that it has a power to effect. And as ordinary beings, we have a certain, we often call that capacity. On the case of the Buddha or Bodhisattvas, then they have their capacity, their power to affect. And then in the case of the Buddha, then they have their power to affect. That's what we call blessings. That power to affect, which is greatly magnified because of the levels of realization and qualities that they have, that then enable them to affect others in ways that may seem may seem extraordinary, that are not ordinary, that they can guide beings in these different ways. But also, the interdependence has to come together. So the students themselves that can be guided in these different kinds of ways, then they have to also have their own
성질랍, 신질랍,
qualifications and so
누바
forth.
욕으로 와.
So then the Buddha has to have their power to affect, what we call the blessings of the power of the Buddha, right? That has, of what that Buddha is. So that's one condition, one interdependence. Also, and then the disciples that can be guided by that, they have to have their interdependence. What's the causes and conditions that enable them to be moved by that, to be affected by that. And so when we begin to understand interdependence or dependent origination in a greater way and such, then we can understand the power to effect, or we could say the blessings of enlightened body, speech, and mind, and how then the interdependence of these circumstances coming together as such is the way in which these different teachings occur.
데니 소 데니 신이 데랑 공도 겨는 돌아 유인 가수 타와텐 장된 중 지바테 히르브 자무고니 데니 군접고 덴바당 돈담비 덴바 탐시 기르니룩도 처리진데 투바당 삼바당 곰밥시니 여보지 히르브도 공페르도 땅 탑나 가수 셈라 디 톱기 데니랑 그 냠는 있나 잡르로 와당 남균 있나 뚜딱도 데니 갸체르 체로 땅 잡르 로고요레 제tam기 냠는 장르로 왔다 예그로 위까블라 프랑샤 탐체때 프랑와테는 릴하로 로고요 왜나 컨트롤직 방거나야 릴하고 want 게르터위아다 데니 가 왜나 샹치부터 셈직 깨거나 녀제 깨거나 게위 쇼강 잠보 가리 깨고 요나야 차창도 릴하고 신이 셈나니 용톱고 요래 가레지나 랑그 셈나라 때다고 ngubu niluk tokpi ni hirp zamochi gilla yon kekhyore ter kewala thusum gumsum guhyore o teni shini teni rona te rang nga cho kerang cho terang di nang la 년간 파체와더 나바인 그래. 데니 옛나 데니 나초 성지 주당 겐는 섬 꿈축 섬라 따빠요 빠당 당위 따빠 노피 따빠 입치비 따빠 다 디스타와 때 강라 투고 오래제나 히럽 라락리오래. 히럽 기고니 줌슨 히피 톡니 쿄라 데니 당와 당도 빠당 입치비 따빠직 용구요. 갈래 갈렙시니 저랑 그 영니 니르고 하고니 줌슨 히니 디망라 가추 히니 따빠 제키오래. 마히 비타빠 제치 모비타빠 제치 짱 요래. 다가치 예치바 대당 점슨 히비고니 예치바 니오르와 디브시나 나와 상지 비타빠 제테 점슨 히비토니 예치바 용고요래. 대옛나 가렙시니 capsun로나 판톡 요래제나 대랑데라 지와 남신데 니 캐런톨라 주바 남제 텐장 렌종 제테 상지 추당 겐든 삼라 누바요. 디 톱기 회나 람냠스 렌나 누바요바 마쟎 꼼축 섬기 누바데랑라 톱고요바 마쟎 나추 뭐 회나 낫 날리 타위체 또 소라타 파다 샤와 람두 체트 꼼축 섬라 소라타 팔라소파 차 참마테요 무부 추니 기고니 용고요 꼼축 섬 뎀바직 인 차르니 존테 딥션 랍테요 말호와리요 딥셔나 테니 히릅 때 타피 잡라 히릅 요고 히오레 히릅 요나 가추 타파땡 담보 누크레 담보 제르탄 누크레 히릅 메나는 타파땡 강삼실라 켄치 그냠 촉촉레 어딘디레스
So Rinpoche said, as we began with today and talking about the sort of summary of the whole Buddhist path and tradition, the view is of dependent origination, and that is the wisdom that realizes relative and ultimate nature of reality. And that wisdom comes about through hearing, contemplating, and meditating on teachings. That's how the wisdom progresses and how it grows. And then as much wisdom as is growing, then our practice is becoming more and more profound and more powerful, more and more impactful and transformative. As strong as our practice is, then that much more powerful it is in overcoming our mental afflictions. So that it gets easier and easier to eliminate, for example, the disturbing emotions, for what we want to be free from. For example, it gets easier to eliminate anger when it rises in our mind stream. And then the qualities that we're cultivating also come to us more and more naturally, those of loving kindness, of compassion, of what we call bodhicitta. It becomes easier and easier. Why? Because the profound wisdom that realizes the true nature of phenomena is growing in our mind stream. And as that expands, then the practice becomes more impactful. It has a greater power to affect, a greater power and influence in our minds. And so then, and how do we cultivate wisdom? Through the threefold process of hearing teachings, contemplating them, and then meditating upon them. And so Rinpoche said, I think that the majority of you who are listening to these teachings today are already, to some extent or more, Buddhist practitioners, and thereby have some confidence, some faith in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We talk about the three kinds of faith: clear faith, yearning faith, and the faith of confidence, confident faith. And faith is born of wisdom, of knowledge. Wisdom being understanding the reason for something. And so the more that we understand the reason for something, how it is what it is and what its power to affect is, the more that we can have these kinds of faith, clear faith, yearning faith, confident faith. And slowly faith grows as our wisdom grows. As we see more and more, our mind aligns with seeing the way things are and their actual nature. So there are two different kinds of faith. One is faith based on wisdom, one that knows the reasoning or logic behind something, that understands or knows something to be the case. And therefore, we have faith in it, we trust it. Or there's blind faith, which means we just believe in something, but we don't have the background of the knowledge of understanding why that's the case and of establishing or proving that to be the case. So in the Buddhist tradition, the focus is on knowledge-based faith, which means we understand the reason for something, we've determined it as such, we have an insight or knowledge about it to know it to be the truth, and then we trust that, and that's what we call faith. And then further, for example, when we look at like going for a refuge, we talk about the benefits of refuge, and this ties into the power to effect and what we've been talking about, interdependence, because then the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the three jewels, each of these has a power to effect. And so obviously the main sort of power to effect is when we practice the path in relation to those, but also they themselves have their own power to effect, which is why we can, for example, say prayers and do practices that then we can overcome illnesses, and that we pray for these things, or we pray for success in our endeavors and so forth, because everything has a power to effect. And if it truly is a Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, then it has that power to effect. And when we rely on that, even through those approaches, we are affected by that because of their infallible power to effect. And so then as we and so when we look at faith, primarily in this tradition, it's the faith that comes through knowledge, or we could say wisdom. If we have faith without knowledge that has no backing, nothing to back it up, then eventually some condition can arise and then we lose our faith because we don't know it to be true in the first place. Also.
어때리 땡이 가립신이 랍연 제나 계랑 존데라 상기기 드니 당연전기 신기 라빠제나라 툭기 신기 라피 도데 히럽냥 보치해요레 딥신럽 가립신님 가립신님 종땅 가레레제나 드리신님 종레 제 무부누법 삼기메 꺄빠레 델라테님 종해요레 제능이 계랑 조때 담제니 유인 데레더니 다 디니급 델랍샹 주생화 아 생화 침보 다 박바 살락니바 박바제나 소수께우 살락 맹큰 소수께우 주 nga초 남진거 박바제야 텔랍 샹칩 생화제야 테초라 nga초 남진거 당전 침보 당나 덕진전 당 당전 침보 당 nga르게 당 착독 당 유모 발라속 바탐 nga초 남진 요말 쫑그 차 탐체 요말 nga초 남진 그 던디 그 몬겨 와당 럭바 당 던디 맹큰 그 똑바길라 덴차리용 그 남라네 가르제키 오르지나 박바제키 오르 디망랍샹 주생화 생화 침보랍 키오르 어때리 드니 인데라 산랍 샹레즈 왕숙세 뜻샹 주생화 탁신급 샹 주생화 수삼기메 캬반디 상기 그 단다 히럽냥 부 코르 딱 꼰쪽섬 냠도 누송한 거니샤나 상기 무수 주그레 드니 추데 히럽냥 부 추요레 겐던다 탁신 당 탁만 그 겐은 니간도가 문이 겐는 마테 존도가 꼰쪽섬 냠도 누요피 갑라 디낭랍 샹칩 생화 삼기메 게 첨척만 보요렌 콜 디낭니 샤니르직 코랑타 드니 대 샤니르직라 다 상기 급 신랍 투기 샤니르직라 떼티오레 규트신기람는 덕송 터비야 그 누반도 나오 드니 상기 그대 또블라 떼니 송코요 오납 샤니르직 제나 가르제 거레제나는 샤니르직 제테 공금 산 토모 마인 빠지 그래 텔라 코르당 니 오래 아 녀르지 피안제야 치고래 피안 텔라 코르당 니 오래 녀르지 피안제야 다 추니기 피안제야 니 오래 녀르지의 그 피안제나 오래 더니 녀르지의 그 피안티 샘신 탐실라 뚜딱도 녀르지의 그 즈기오 봐다 피암당 녀르지 요비 차트 딱봐 피앙 조생 화당 상기 탐식기 너니 회적사 따오데 ngunni tawarto nyangje chembo tong damba te fyangri gzikre a mixer wa chi gore ko te ni nyangji fyan ze ke gore chuni ki fyan ze na khirab la ko go gore yang tak pi khniluk tok pi khirab ti kang la ze ke gore zena khniluk chu ki yang la tak to ze ke gore te la nyam jik she ke gore ti fyan na te la fyan ze ze ni ko na digre fyangri gzik wam shuk chang 다 공터니 히럽기 파르도 심바자 모쇼바닐라 넘버 따장스 공터 샤피 히럽기 파르도 심바 따와자 모지 요아 오 테타 우테니 당한진지 응라 템냠버 샥송 송레 공게요 테타 우 냠식 때는 폼보 nga 탐식 그 추니디앙 때리 제레 다 옥님 좀 그래 폼보 nga데 죽말 죽기 폼보 소리 폼보 누히당 덥셰당 남히기 폼보제 폼보 나가나 당아주 추탐제 랍 강망티 업더도요레 누치기 추탐제 폼보이 난더도 그래 오 테스타부터니 폼보가 테탁랑랑 경험다 버지 따오 소나 더니 추탐치기 추닐람냠식 시송지 비돈 따테리 너르두나 다 폼보가 옥님 숑 그래 가서 단다 랍고만 누기봐 다 공금 냠식 시송송레 테스타 동안 넘버 따오 사람지기 동안 넘버 따오
And so the reason why I'm speaking about this is because as we look, then we're speaking about this sutra, the Heart Sutra, as being one that came about through the blessings of the enlightened intent of the Buddha, and explaining what that means. That everything in the universe has a power to affect, and that is often that the interdependence of how that power to affect comes is often inconceivable to us, but it does have that power to affect whether we know what that interdependence is or not. And so then at this time, through the power, the blessings of the Buddha's presence, the blessings of the Buddha resting in meditative equipoise, then this teaching came about in this and continues to unfold in this way. So it says, while the Buddha was resting in that meditation, also at that time, Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looked comprehensively at the experience of the profound perfection of sublime wisdom and saw that in all their variety, the five mind body aggregates are empty by nature. So as we continue reading in the text that you have, then first it says noble, and that is in Sanskrit, the term is Arya, and it means then not an ordinary being, but someone who has reached then the high levels of realization. In fact, the word itself kind of means to have like jumped above or gone above something. And so they're elevated would be another translation of Arya. And we commonly, simple, less literal translation is noble, but it means someone who has gone beyond, has kind of gone above, is elevated above ordinary mind. Like they are no longer stuck in the same ways as we are in the belief and construct of the grasping to a self in pride, jealousy, disturbing emotions, and so forth. They're no longer an ordinary being under the power of disturbing emotions. They're elevated, they have gone above that. They're at the levels of realization, so they're an Arya or noble being. And so that's what that term refers to. It's indicating that Avalokiteshvara is not an ordinary being. Through the power of his qualities, he's gone the level above an ordinary being due to the power of the qualities and realization that he has. And so then here, Avalokiteshvara is one of the bodhisattvas of the Mahayana tradition. And in fact, just as a side note here, we can see that all the three jewels are present because there's the presence of the Buddha, so a Buddha, and then we have the noble Sangha, which is of the both of the Hinayana and Mahayana, the bodhisattvas and fully ordained practitioners. The Sangha is there, Buddha, Dharma, and the Dharma, which is the Heart Sutra. So the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are all three here in this very profound way. And then through the power of the blessings, the presence of the Buddha's enlightened intent, Avalokiteshvara, as one amongst the Sangha, was able to speak. And then when we look at Avalokiteshvara, the name also has a meaning. The Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara Chenrezik, which doesn't translate well into English, so we rarely do it. It's something like looking with all eyes, but it has a specific meaning. And so then one way of looking at the meaning, it's a description of Avalokiteshvara's qualities, is the eyes of compassion. And another way of interpreting the name is the one with the eyes of dharmata, of true nature. So on the one hand, Avalokiteshvara is called eyes of compassion because as a bodhisattva, he sort of exemplifies as the very epitome of great compassion, always gazing on all beings with immeasurable loving kindness and compassion. And Avalokiteshvara stands out as an exemplar amongst the bodhisattvas for his compassionate nature and is often referred to as the bodhisattva of compassion. And so then if we interpret Avalokiteshvara's name as the eyes of compassion, that would be that meaning. But we can also interpret the name as the eyes of dharmata, of true nature, because Avalokiteshvara has seen the natural state, the authentic and true nature of all phenomena, and is constantly seeing that basic space of phenomena and resting in the meditative equipoise of that. And that interpretation,
looking with
we
the
could say,
eyes.
the name Avalokiteshvara would be like looking with eyes. You could see why we don't usually leave it in English. But the eyes can have two meanings. One is compassionate and one with wisdom. So in this context, we can look at it more kind of emphasized on the wisdom aspect because Avalokiteshvara looked comprehensively at the experience of the profound perfection of sublime wisdom and saw in all their variety the five mind-body aggregates are empty by nature. And so the five mind-body aggregates is one way in which we can speak of the all phenomena. All composite phenomena can be subsumed within this category of these five mind-body aggregates, which are called forms, sensations, perceptions, conditioning factors, and consciousness. And we'll go through them in greater detail. And at the end, I'll mention that there's a guide that we've added to your resources. At the end of the teaching, I'll talk about that. And so these five mind-body aggregates are a way of speaking about the entire composite universe of phenomena. And so essentially by seeing that they're empty by nature then and resting in that meditative absorption, we're saying that Avalokiteshvara was seeing the true nature of all phenomena. And it's just a very sort of scholastic way to say it with very specific reason. And so Rinpoche said, don't worry, we'll get into what these five mind-body aggregates are, but essentially it's saying all phenomena.
Teni sangi kimtu cedong damba gari wu shangju sangwa chemo pagwapshani zogam shulande kachi miso o soni teni sangi kimtu zayate kondu shapa namjin de sangi kushin lap tob lap teni ta trawa tram khantas tin khor tini mangpo yore tinani su taka yore zenane cedong damba gari wu zayate taka yore zen ta gari wu vipashyana tani 타문기 강석 남줄 때래 콘더니 남바데 타문기 강석 남바 잔도 나가요래 옛나양 더니 하리부자데 히럽금 촉도 결바래 상직을 홈마 차창가 나니 히럽김 촉도 결와 하리부다 점트리김 촉도 결바 모언가르기 보세 니요래 공거 딱 봐라 회나 계랑주디 탕가데 중월한 참참 따다 Sanji Kri Tang Yun La Tawani Yayo Pate, Tere, Teni Kariu Tang Mongar Unikare, Konguzur La Homani Alandua, Deni Tere, Chick the Hirukum Shok to Kurare, Chick the Zumshukum Shok to Kurpare, the Hirukum Shok to Kura Karibure, Koniga Pe Kemsa Wonderboy name, Karina Karibu Zete, the Kari Zete Amagamare, Amimala Kare Karabo. Jiba Jason, Kari Kala, Kari Kola, Kari. Oh, yeah.
Do you know what day?
Karatoti.
Shariputa.
Yeah, Karatoti in Saresangado.
That's
Karatoti is a Amakamang Karachik Zekiore. Teni Ami Mount pull up Tagni, Pugula, and Karipu Zekiore, the son of Uchari. Teni Mongarki Woyan Koranga Amak Taxo. Mongar the Koranga Amari. Teni Putela. Teni young Kari Mongarki Wu Labna. Teni young Koranga Mangachik Sondorna. Or the Dipshini, Teni Koniga Mante or a tea Kari Wu Shanch, tea Shanch Shankwapshani Zealand Ketchir Miso Songre. Or did he?
Then, through the power of the Buddha, which now we've already explained, when talking about what blessings are, that power to effect and so forth, through the power of the Buddha, then the worthy Shariputra asked noble Avalokiteshvara a question. And so then here amongst a great retinue, then specifically Shariputra was moved to ask a question. And so Shariputra then was one of the Hinayana Sangha, a prominent figure, but particularly was known for his kind of great realization of wisdom. And so he exemplified the realization of wisdom. And so amongst this particular Sangha, then the Buddha had two students, and one was said to be foremost in the Prajna teachings on wisdom, and that was Shariputra. And the other was said to be knowledgeable in the wisdom teachings, which was
knowledgeable
so knowledgeable. The most knowledgeable was considered to be Shariputra. He was extremely erudite and had great insight of relative and ultimate reality, and was able to ascertain and understand things extremely quickly.
He's a very smart student. Even before he graduated, he was already very famous.
And then the one who is said to be a master of miracles was Moggallana. And so these two, oftentimes you'll see a picture of the Buddha on a tanka, and you'll have to his right and left are one monk on either, standing on either side of the Buddha, and that is these two students, Shariputra, who was foremost in knowledge, and then Moggallana, who was foremost in being able to perform miracles. And so Rinpoche said, and both these guys have pretty funny names. Actually, when we look at like the meaning of their names, like Sharipu literally means child or son of Shari. And so his mother's name was Sharatoti. And then they added another syllable in the original languages of Sanskrit and Tibetan, and it makes it like son of Shara. And then Moggallana also was named after his mother, and it also meant like mother, son of Moggal or something along those lines. And so then both of these were outstanding and kind of foremost students amongst the Buddha's retinue. And so at this point, then Shariputra specifically is moved to ask a question of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. Lasso?
Tereteni rikyo mo kanglala kiraki parto shama zamu shoba shaparando pandi chertal haparasha teke chimi patang zeni taku trawa kariti songzena shani zi nyamshik shi nduyor watangen zela di kapla teni hariputa ke trawa tire rikyo mo kanglala shipate ta ndi ni kap ke dorsha ke wangto samlo tangna rikyo mo se kyapar kanyang yo mare rikyo tang wo mo kang yin na yang 히르기 파르토 셴바 죽초호요레 옛나양 더니 가르테 테타고 wotan womo 세인나 히르기 파르토 셴바 죽초비 강사때 코랑 리당 손노 믹서와치 인송레 gemsen 강레제나는 코랑 리당 손노 예포 멘칸치 옛나네 회나 깨와 나마 탐체 그니 감나 구 개와 싹니 이더니 코랑 그 짓티지면 용칸 그 예포치 만나네 wotan seeing kana dikhir ki part of shimbaze te ha lipi zammo imbi gimsen ki tela tetum zamyang zagma re songore wana nga chu khirib ki part of shimbala tetum zamyang za songna ya chik thana khirib ki part of shimba yang ta par tok songna ta sam ki ma khyap pare ye te manna ya o chik thana ndri dawo yin sare sam chik gowa rak songna ya tetum zam zu songna ya ne 마음 바나 티 사분 샘나 직 요레 티 스톱기 마음 바다 스트파 슈르셴 송니 코리 싸와 마릭파 싸와니 니fan테 피 히럽 줄라 깨 용그레제 히럽 자모 마음 바 깨니 태좀 맷니 따와 양탁파 똥로 그레제 디브셔나나 너타우 히럽기 파르토 셴바 똥바니 그 코르라 스토와 용칸땅 똥바니 그 코라 얼가와 용칸테 소이나 rik mixer wa sonum chanki tani rik ki wotang womo zeta tani la tsagu ko yore rik tang dam bi wotang womo zeki yore de rik ki wom womo zeta rik tang dam ba se korang rik manda ba da wo yore the different family rik ki womo kang la se shir tang ge tani wotang womo ze kang la kyapra yo mar ten den de sang di kha te pi ne ke lo ni tong lak ngam ko lo ni tong ta ta par che tukja yar mar ke kap ko 다 갑그 때 로르규레 데 gemsende ter tabu kapla rikiwam rikyomoze shirtang ge yagar ke nalar hali biring thoman yore poda mog kyapra yore teni yang rik korang yang mandawa ma bog thoman pe chembo yore yenna yang tan nabi lugla tsawani ni changji ke me prabzu jor yo mare songore nabi chu de su nyamsu len kan yenna teni telana chulu kyapra yo mare teni 포모기 캡브레요 말에 강슝기 캡브레요 말에 teni ndorna rang soso strowa yong kan chigena nang wilam lan juk cho songare tadi re ta terang di ni kap soyang kare la kore zena wotang womo sei na teni rik ki wotang womo tam ke khirab ki bharto shemba nyamnen shek guna tela tuba tang samba tang gombi goni sap gu khyo na kari che gu kre ze ta trawati re konso teni muba yong kan tang teni strowa yong kan chig yo na tela tapa tang teni yong kan yin na kari che gu re ze kyo re teni ngi tata yu na tela tapa yong kan tang muba yong kan tang shopa shapa ndo pati zena konso teni girik ki wotang womo teni ge ndo pa tang teni tela strowa yong kan girik yo na kari che gu re zeni ta teni song rok chi song re zhiwa chi re
So the question that Shariputra asked or posed to Avalokiteshvara as Avalokiteshvara was resting also in this profound insight, this meditative equipoise of insight, was how should any son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to engage in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? And so then this question, it says, any son or daughter of noble family. So what that means of noble family then means then someone who previously had accumulated, like in previous lifetimes and so forth, the merit and so forth, to have then an interest in realizing the ultimate nature, whether they be
sosu
male
tewo
or
yin na
female.
dikare di rik ki
Whether
wotang
and
womo
so
ze
then
te
the
yung gu kare
child of spiritual good fortune it is any ordinary being
옛날 릭만 라바래.
that, and as ordinary beings, we also all have kind of different capacities of what they call in Tibetan, it's called like families.
무바
And it's just
카카요래,
like it
릭
depends on our
카카요래,
interests,
왕보 카카요래.
our capacities, what inspires us, and so forth. And so here specifically, then when it says a child of spiritual good fortune, then it means someone who like wonders about and wants to know about these things. There are some people who never even have a thought about it, who never even have a doubt about the way things are, who, in the sense of like, of this more profound nature. And so then someone who has kind of like a doubt about the way things appear, wonders about what could the actual nature be, and wish to pursue that. Even just beginning to wonder about the nature of reality, just having that wondering about it, can be like a seed that if planted can uproot through the cultivation then of profound wisdom or insight into the nature of reality, can eventuate in uprooting the sources of samsara in entirety. So even just the doubt about the nature of things is like a seed that can lead to awakening. And so here, child of spiritual good fortune means someone who has an interest in pursuing that, who's enthusiastic, who wants it, who's curious. And that comes from merit, having previously created sort of spiritual good fortune and so forth. So anyone in this family, and it means anyone, it says son or daughter, any child of spiritual good fortune, anyone. This was and it also has a kind of a greater meaning and context, because the Buddha Shakyamuni was born into a society over 2,600 years ago in India that was extremely classist. The classes were very strong. The differences between male and female roles were very strong, and so forth. And he was radical in that Buddhism was for anyone who wanted it, and there was no difference between men or women, between class, between what religion they may have previously followed or follow. And it was merely then everyone it was equally available to everyone without any of those kinds of differentiations. And so essentially, whoever had enthusiasm for it could have it. Equal opportunity. And so that's why it says any son or daughter, child of noble family, then means someone who is inspired to realize wisdom that will take us to the other side, the prajna paramita. And who wants to hear teachings on that, to explore that, to contemplate that, to meditate upon it. Whoever wants it, whoever is inspired by it, has faith in that, has interest in that, wants to realize that, is a child of spiritual good fortune. So whoever is interested, then what should they do? And that's what this question is saying. What should they do? How should they realize it? Also?
Look like, I don't know that time was Indian cultures. What look like it, we don't know. But if these days, like America way, look like we just imagined this history, so then maybe, Shariputra did meditate like this, and then no, Shari Zig,
Avalokiteshvara.
Avalokiteshvara, not exactly, but, and then Shariputra, and that's many people, there's so many students, it look like that, and then he asked to Shari Zig to these teachings, and then Shari Zig saying like, well, you know, like in this culture, I don't know that time what happened, but look like it's similar like that. Uh-huh. I can see a little bit their expressions. Uh-huh. 아, 대개지미 바당. 샹치부 생화 첨보 파와샹에서 왕시 그 쩌랑다마 카란도 디볼란 대개지미 소트리 카라또 디 텔랍도가.
네.
카라또 디
어리샤도 디부
내기바테도.
그게도네 어레
어.
네.
파와샹에서 왕시 쩌랑다마 카란도 디볼라 대개지미 소 리키밤 리키모 강라락 히르키 파르투시마 잠무시브란도바딘 더튼 남바타버 샤테 제니 타히르키 파르투 심바 라 치르터 죽비 수르트 샤네스 급 샤크요레 카리볼라 란타 피니 깜나 데디시니 란타브레스 데타우 카라탄다 미르키 보통 리키모 강라라 히르키 파르투 심바 잠무시브란도반디 히르키 파르투 심바 ngubu niluk yang tak pacik tok par ndot pi tela ne trowa yung kan ta tela muba yung kan ka nam la ne khonchu ndiri chi ni lap gu kre sri khonchu ndiri chi ni tuba tang samba tang tani gombi go ni tawar she gu kre sen dat number tawar sha te phong ngao te tak chang rang ki tong na ta kwa ji tao song ni ne phong bo ngao te tak chang se dan di ok la yo re zuk ki phong bo chori phong bo 누히기 퐁포, 눕시기 퐁포, 남히기 퐁포 제니 퐁포 나 요래. 딱 zuki 퐁포 지바 어다 때레 zuki 퐁포 디 퐁포레. 람진기 똥바량 딱과지수 따오 송레. 다 뜨제나 뜨니 가레 랍히오레 제나는 퐁하고 대딱장 람진기 똥바량 딱과지수 따오 송나. 대 람진기 제나네 예니 코랑거 니룩 데르타르 코랑 그 추니 때 타고 임바데 얘니 맙주바 임반다고 지그 똥니 거주 니룩 때 똥니 때 똥바레 디그니룩 때 하고고 근도 송레 다티마나 츠두브장나 가츠 유르땅 유르친 회나 남히 회나 존와 유르땅는 점바 셈니카티낭 포보르가 때 츠브드난 디탑그레 가츠 존와 유르제니 유르 요토 쪽 탐쳇땅 남히 지그 유르 요토 쪽 탐쳇땅 되니 유르친 그 히바데 대딱 탐체 때 디람진 대람진 기토마 디 무보 탐체 돈 담발라 람진 기토니 때제 고초 군좁도 아주 르크요래 아주 통크요래 덤 아주 소수께어 남기 믹당 나와당 나당 제당 루당 일라속 비 유르도 우즈다트로 락샤망 보지 낭크요래 옛나야 돈 담발라 람진 기토니 마트 피르니 룩치기 오레세 khoena nga chu zug lap sam lo ta na nga chu ta ti zug nga ra so so la zug yore ka ba yore lag ba yore teni nga chu sam lo ta na di ka ba ta lag pa de da wo chi sam lo tang du ko yore ne la pak pa yore kha yore ru pa yore teni ru ba ga na la teni kang yore o thak yore teni na thol ma po yore organs yore te cho ko nga chu zug po de di da wo yim ba chi sam lo tang du ko 때와 옛나양 대가주 소수 겨워 남기 올라낭 쳤대 가주 진 쳤대 가주 미크 히바당 나위 히발라 소피 되니 유르란드니 그렇게요레스 옛나양 되니 랑진 돈 담발라는 더 랑진 기 마트파데 니 니룩데 데라 니룩치기요레 제레 가주 맘통 위차치 다타 닌니 경데 돈 담발란데 가주 다타 타말 마탁 비히비 올람 통토가 메피 니룩 지기오레 데라 더 하장 그 잠모레 디니룩 때 셈라양 디니룩 오레 유르 탐첼라 디니룩 때 탐첼라 마캬 파이오 말 디니룩 때 when 아주 하니 다wo 지기나 가와니 자나 와르모르와 쿠키 다wo 지 가니 자나 와르모르와 코랑 텔라티 캡드 거래 쿠키 요토 쪽 탐쳤당 하니 요토 쪽 탐쳤랑 말무 잡어 포에테 나우진 가츠디 유르땅 유르첸 탐첼라 디 람진 똥바니 임바디 캡드 거래 옛날 디 차대 가츠 모히히요 말 vipashyana de la ramjin ki tongpa yang takwa jisu tawo zeke yore. Tadongi sarche chik shwe dongdi ramjin ki tongpa zaya tela tondak chik yore korang. Ye ni marchu bi goni korang ye ni yinluk dawo chik yinba la kogore. Ye ni korang ka chuni yinba, ye ni korang ka niluk yinba chik la kogore matong. Taga chik ngubo me songwa dawo chik tang chik kang me songwa dawo chik la kwa yo ma rezere teningi kyang to labyo.
So, Shariputra asked this question and addressed in this way, Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, spoke the following words to the worthy Shariputra. So now he gives a response and answer. And he says, O Shariputra, any son or daughter of noble family who wishes to engage in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should see everything as follows. See authentically that the 5 mind-body aggregates are empty by nature. And so that is the sort of short answer. And so, children of spiritual good fortune, son or daughter of spiritual good fortune, those who have this interest in this inclination, then who wish to realize wisdom that will take us to the other side, who yearn to realize the authentic and true natural state, who are enthusiastic for that, who are devoted to that. How should they proceed? And so Avalokiteshvara says in response, then anyone who wishes to engage in the practice, which means the hearing of teachings, contemplating and meditating of those, then they of the profound perfection of wisdom should see everything as follows. That the 5 mind-body aggregates are empty by nature. And so we'll get into this. This will be sort of unpacked slowly, but basically the 5 mind-body aggregates in a nutshell are forms, sensations, perceptions, conditioning factors, and consciousness. And it's a way of categorizing all of our experience, perceiver and perceived. And so then all of this is empty by nature. By its very nature, which means timelessly, its own natural state is that. It's timelessly always been that. And so all phenomena here being described in the 5 mind-body aggregates, it means then what is perceived and then the perceiver of those. So forms, all that we perceive, and then all the different factors of the mind that is perceiving these objects. What is their actual nature, the nature of perceiver and perceived, subject and object? And so here, given through this format of what are called 5 mind-body aggregates. So on the relative way, there's the way things appear. And we see them and so forth. As ordinary beings, we perceive and experience forms, sounds, sights, tactile sensations, sense, flavors. We have our 5 sensory objects that we perceive. And then there's the perceiver of those, visual, audio, and so forth. All of these in entirety, all of perceiver and perceived are ultimately, their ultimate nature is empty by nature. That is their natural state. So for example, when we take our physical body, which is a form, and we look at it and we're like, we have our hands and our legs and our skin and our flesh and our bones and the marrow of our bones and all of our vascular system of blood and veins and then our internal organs and so forth. All that constitutes the material physical body is a mechanism that we call a body. To ordinary beings, there's a way that it appears to us and a way that we perceive it. and it's an object of it's a visual object, it's a sensory object, it's a tactile object, a scent object, and so forth. An object of the senses, sense consciousnesses. So there's the way it appears. But then what is its ultimate nature? What is ultimately true about the appearance of our physical body, our form? It is empty by nature. That doesn't deny the appearance relatively right now as we experience it in whatever way we perceive and experience it. Ultimately, its nature is the same. The difference is that ordinary mind and consciousness that it involves non-recognition of true nature is not seeing it from the perspective of its natural state, of its actual nature. We see the way that it appears, but we're not experiencing its actual nature. And so
풍부
our
군접 그 차도
physical
막
form,
통고요 말.
then
나랑 소수.
we are
군접 그
only
참,
perceiving its relative nature, the way it appears.
Teni 때랑 teni zupo
So
drakayo.
then we think, okay, I need to wash my body,
Teni
I need to brush my teeth, I need to floss. And then we have so many things that we have to do to take care of this body. So that's all we're ever thinking about is the relative nature of that body, how it relatively appears, and the care of that. And I'm sick, or I have a headache, and I don't feel good, my feet hurt.
It hurt my Achilles.
My Achilles tendon hurts.
Achilles.
I can't say it either.
So
we have all these thoughts about it. But all we're relating to is one aspect, the relative aspect. But then, more than that, what is its ultimate nature? We're not seeing it. That there's its actual nature. But we're not seeing it, we're not thinking about it, we're not looking at it. That needs wisdom. What sees its actual nature, its ultimate nature, is the wisdom that takes us to the other side, profound wisdom, prajna paramita. That's what sees its actual nature. And from the perspective of that actual nature, everything, subject and object, all that we perceive as the objects of our perception, and then all the aspects that are the perceiver of those objects are empty by nature. That is their natural state. There isn't anything that's not that. So, for example, it's like no matter where you taste honey, it's always sweet. Or wherever you taste like a cookie, it's permeated by sweetness. So whichever part of the cookie you take a bite of, it's sweet. Whatever part of the honey you taste, it's sweet. Similarly, whatever aspect of reality, be it perceiver or perceived, subject and object, in entirety is empty, is permeated by its nature. So it is empty by nature. But that aspect of it, its actual nature, is not typically what we're relating to, what we're seeing or recognizing or knowing about a thing. We're focused on the way it appears, the relative appearance of it versus its actual nature. Its actual nature is what it is by its very nature. What it is timelessly, what it always is, no matter how it appears and arises. And that doesn't mean, like emptiness, that means that now it can't be, that it's nothingness, that it has to disappear or anything. While it is appearing, it is that nature. And that is why it is by that very nature, empty by nature, even as it appears. Awesome.
Oh yeah, teningi karlap khyoze nandi kabla kirantu hakogowa chigla. In English, you usually say empty, and the emptiness is a little bit different. Empty means that there's many ways you can understand. But in Tibetan, we call the emptiness, means tongba need. Tong need, if you this art, need that words, and then make a different meaning. That's going to true nature. Tani inna tani ngin tani kerang thola tongni zaya te shir mar tongpa zaya te la mampo kosa yores.
Yeah, that's so.
Te so kanyang maim pa chik nguzeng kuk yore. Kare re zena na tani yud mam nyong pi tongni chik yore nga su jikten kamdala yud mam nyong waka me pa zaya chik yore nga su tongni zena tongpa zaya chik yore. Yud mam nyong wi tongpa zaya chik yore. Ta kare re zena na nga su po pe funny re nga su kare ze kore na rural la fuh tani yod nyong ma se me pa rural ki fuh nam ki me tok nam ka tongpa la me tok me re ye ni teni rung ras nga su teni me pa mambo funny mambo ndenya yore teni korang teso inna tani jikten kam yod mam nyong ware teni yang jikten kam dala yod ni me songwi me pare when a dano so de nga chu jikten di nang la yo mar ze ndo wa ti tando te when a yod ni tangwo yo re teni me songni te me pa chik yore ndi tongni ze te technica la ko yo mare ye ni yod mam nyong wa chi la yang ko yo mare ko me pa me kyang chik teni yod na yang jima chi la chik me songni tem when nga chu re teni me tok chik me per su sona ta yang ken chik tan kham la yo yo mar wa teni te ta teni tangwo yod ni me tok chik yod ni jima me song re teni na jig ni me song wa re teni when na kambi na to mi tong ba da wo yang me pare tong ba re mo yo ma re se kambi na to yang nga chu kang pa tong ba re se nothingness se ke chik yore
Empty, we call it there.
empty
Empty house.
ndi me pa se te so kang yang ko na de ke yo ma re 폼보 nga chuni zya te yin nang da sem ki chuni ji pa te teni ndir ta wu me pa te chon da wo re sam na na nor khu yo re te ko yo ma re teni sa shit kale kale nga chu chi gong na rig ri ti she na ram jin ki tong ba ji pi tsik te ting wa la jar gong khu yo re ram jin ki tong ba se chik ti ji la jar gong khu yo re o teni res
So when we look at the terms, as Rinpoche explained, oftentimes we'll say emptiness and they add a reflexive syllable to sort of make it differentiate it from empty. But in general, the term empty itself has many different kind of connotations and context, and typically means the absence of something or of nothing, leaning towards non-existence. The verb of the non-existence, like it's something that doesn't exist or isn't there or is nothingness. And so this empty needs to be differentiated in understanding from those kinds of empty that are the absence of or the non-existence of something. Should not be mixed with that. And so, for example, there's the non-existence of something, like if something has never existed in the universe, then it doesn't exist. And we might say it's empty of existing. So, for example, in Tibetan, we have lots of funny examples that we've come up with, like something that isn't the case. So, like we'll say the hair on a turtle, or a flower in the sky, or the horns of a rabbit. And we're talking about we're giving examples of something that doesn't exist and thereby is non-existent because it has never appeared or does not appear. So that would be like the emptiness of non-existence of something that's never happened. Or then there's the emptiness, or there's like the idea of non-existence in the sense of that it previously existed, but it's no longer in extent. So for example, dinosaurs. People say that dinosaurs are no longer living. So if that's the case, then they were previously present, and now they don't exist. And so that's another form of non-existence, and emptiness is not that either. And so we should not misinterpret the word empty or emptiness in this context to either mean that something absolutely doesn't exist in the universe in the first place, has never existed, nor should we think that it's something that previously existed and now doesn't exist. Like it was previously present and now it's collapsed or disappeared. The flower died and it's no longer here. It'll never be retrieved again. Not that either. And then there's the empty in the sense of like the absence of something. Like we can say when there's no people in the house, we say it's an empty house. Or when something isn't inside of something else, we'll say it's empty. Doesn't have that in it. Not that empty either. So when we look at the actual nature of the 5 mind-body aggregates as the sort of enumeration, a way of explaining our universe in terms of perceiver and perceived. The 5 mind-body aggregates, all the objects that we perceive and the perceiving mind that experiences them, then it is a mistake to think that when we say they are empty, that means that they are any of those forms of non-existence that I just enumerated. And that is why the term very specifically says empty by nature. Because it's not saying it doesn't exist in any of those ways. And we will get into this as we continue to explore in this teaching. But there is a key element to that expression and the reason why it's used and worded in such a way here. Also?
다 가르쳐 교리에서 나는 히럽라 지스트는 죽비 출시야 교로와. 히럽라 지스트는 죽비 출제는 아주 히럽도 가립시니 아주 줄라께 답지 무부 니룩 똑비 히럽지 줄라께고나 가립시고 그래서 다더니 그 따와지 줄라께고나 가래고 그래서니 코나바니기 들어왔던 틀림시니 가리우더니 람진기 동파량 딱바지서 따오제니 람진기 동파량 딱바라 똑고 그래 제키어려 다땡 아주 투비고니 측 섭용쉿 데니 측대초 섭용쉿 데니 삼비고니 때라 삼로땅 샤파땅 임선 가네둑 가렌둑 차상따 디고니 땅 삼비 히럽땅 데니 냠는 시발라 때니 강삼실라 냠용고 열라께 용고 냠용고 똑용고 요래 디브셔나네 때니 오테타르도 시나 딱 히럽도 열라께 고요래 히럽들이 자모치 열라께 셰파테 가레고 고르즈나 유르추기 리앙제야데 추리앙제야데 다마 다토제야데 참참라 we call the dharma kaya 동바 닛 대초 인고래 대초더니 추담기 추닛데세 히럽 그 디하고나 되니 히럽 열라께 용그레스 강 통화를 피하위 리응도 하고고 그래 통화를 피하위 유르때 하고고 그래 히럽기 더 하마고나 대톡비 히럽 영탁 바직정 열라께 요 말을 대타우 다르마 다토제테 땅 다르마 가야제테 땅 람진기 똥바제테 소 직착해요래 디브셔나 아투 라카나 마르고 컴바이나라 메메피 똥바테 다르마 가야 마르와 롱골라 라메파테 다르마 가야 마르와 다노소 메송와테 다르마 가야 마르와 오야 다르마 가제타 하창 그 잠모토 더 추탐기 추니티엠바 추탐기 니룩엠바 이영아 딱비 돈 담비 뎀바임바치 하고고 그요레티 똥니테 땅 아주 돈돈예샤 뜻똑고 그요레 더 치르터 똑수르 간데시니 똑고레제나 샤네즈 근데니 다 송용 그요레 포옹아오람지 돈나타고지 따고 그레스 오나 뜻간데시니 따고레제나 니 올랍샤디 그래 어디리레스
So now we're looking at how does wisdom, the prajnaparamita, this profound wisdom that brings us to the other side, how does this wisdom, how do we generate this wisdom? How do we give rise to and train in this wisdom? And so the question posed by Shariputra to Avalokiteshvara, and then in response, Avalokiteshvara says, by realizing the true nature of phenomena. That's how we cultivate that. By realizing then the true nature of phenomena to be empty by nature. And we go through that process. The practice of that, to realize that, is threefold. We hear teachings. That's what often is translated as study, which is where we hear the words and their meaning and the terms, and we have a comprehension of that. And then following that is the internal process of contemplation, in which we examine that meaning. We take the lines of reasoning and process it through to come to that understanding, and then we understand it through contemplation. We understand the logic or reasoning of it. And then we implement that into our experience. That's called practice or meditation, so that eventually we realize it to be the case through our direct experience of it. And so that's how we cultivate wisdom. And what we're cultivating wisdom of is of the most profound nature here. We're generating in our mind a profound insight of the actual or absolute nature of reality, of perceiver and perceived. So we could say if the object of wisdom, what is realized by wisdom, is the ultimate nature, and there are words for that. For example, dharma dhatu, which could be translated as the basic space of phenomena. That's one term that's used. Or dharmakaya, another term, you could translate that as something like absolute dimension. Or emptiness. Or dharmata, the true nature of the phenomena. And so essentially all of these are the true nature of phenomena. They're terms that are used to describe it. So that's what wisdom knows, the empty nature of phenomena. How it's empty by nature. It's dharma dhatu, it's the basic space of phenomena. That's its nature. Or it's dharmakaya, that's its nature. These are Sanskrit terms that are describing that ultimate nature. And that's what wisdom realizes. We could say dharma dhatu, the basic space of phenomena. We could say dharmakaya, the absolute dimension. We could say empty by nature. And all of those is saying the same thing, and we are not speaking about an empty house. Not that kind of non-existence. That's not dharmakaya. We are not speaking about the horns of a rabbit. That's not dharmakaya. We are not speaking about a dinosaur, the non-existence of dinosaurs. That's not dharmakaya. We are speaking about the very nature of what is appearing in this moment by its nature, the natural state of all phenomena. Their ultimate nature, just as it is. And so anyone who wishes to realize that, to pursue the realization of that, what do they need to do? They need to cultivate the view, where is it? To see that the five mind-body aggregates are empty by nature. And so then that's the way in which we realize this. Avalokiteshvara says that's how we generate wisdom. And then from there, he goes on to explain how we see all of phenomena to be empty by nature. Mm-hmm. And that's the teaching that's coming.
Yeah, tani ta nga so trawa chik tu chot. Deni ma sangye nizuk tongba tongwa nizuk so jipani.
So tomorrow we will get into the actual teaching of what it is, which begins with form is emptiness and emptiness is form and continues from there. That's where we'll start the teachings tomorrow, which is basically the definition of profound wisdom. So today we're looking at how do we practice profound wisdom. Then tomorrow we're going to look at what is profound wisdom. What does it realize? Does it know?
Uh-huh.
So maybe there are some questions for people here in the room. And then I will be repeating them. So try to make it very clear and succinct. Julie?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you. Yeah. Yeah, that's the way to practice. So the question was when we spoke about the way to practice as being hearing, contemplating, and meditating, could Rinpoche clarify the difference between hearing, contemplating, and meditating?
Contemplating, meditating. Yes,
Mhm.
I will. So the karere zenana deni koran rugby goni shat pap she kyo patean shirtang shat gum rawo chik zena dik dik yore shirtang gum kama tak yore shat gum yak pop shi na nyumo ba arak ba ngonun ro fang ro la pantok yore yena deni tak zowo shat pap she kore sem oyo pap she yore hago songa deni gumba zete de mare jirni ta lang tong zong du juk pi goni jirni ki tokni 탕통 람 냠식 시니 공도 샤니즈 냠식 시송아 디 갑라 샤니즈 그 샤파 땅해요 말에 다니 옛나양 다니 나투 디 갑라 가레 샤 고레제나 곰제테 똥니 람 냠식 샤고 그요 지그니 동단 비 똥니
Mhm.
호요와 메파 강참 강탑 띵어나 니고 그요
So
띠망가
shetar jela shigyu be kabla negative.
노노
No gom
다니
kabla.
카카레 라비
Oh.
샤금 코랑 참삼락 샷바
No, no.
코랑 양
Ne
굼레
shading bo shesa she, not chatting bo, not tao paita chata chet. Like tongni yen shebe kabla, shading bo shesa shebe kabla ngangla jogyo. So samlo tangni figure it out chege mebe kabla. But wrong la nge
What?
payo.
I don't understand what
Wrong la nge
her
payo yube
question. Mi
kabla.
teni chu ko ma song. Sha
Gom
pa dang chu teni ko kya par kare la ma song e chu.
the
Sam ba dang gom ba
so
ni.
samba the
Sam ba gom ba ni
yes,
kya par kare la
takching
song e chu.
chebe kabla gyms and namtok, but then gom kabla di kabla sherab yore nye she nye pa
Yor
yore.
yor yang
Okay,
yor.
that's what I'm asking.
Jir ni dang lang dong
Listen.
zong juk re.
Yeah.
De ka le ngi lab yong.
So I'll speak more about this, but basically, contemplation, which is also meditation, it is a practice. So we often say contemplative meditation, or another translation for the same exact term in Tibetan is analytical meditation. It means we're using our concepts of logic and reasoning to investigate something to arrive at a certainty. And so our mind is moving, we're thinking about it. So that's contemplative meditation or contemplation. So we're thinking about the meaning using the lines and reasoning, and it can help to reduce our disturbing emotions and thought process to some extent. And so it's gaining certainty through using our mental capacities. Meditation is when you have the unity of calm abiding, one pointed focus, and that profound insight. So you have a certainty of the true nature and you're resting in that, and it's not using your conceptual mind to figure it out. You already have the certainty. And so it's the unity of shamatha and vipassana, calm abiding and profound insight. And Rinpoche said we will go into that in more detail as we kind of go through these teachings. But that's the basic difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talk about dependent origination, and then in the same sentence we talk about interdependent. It's the same word in Tibetan.
Yeah.
Does that help? I'm always trying to say that. We translate. The question was talking about dependent origination versus interdependence, and I tried to make it clear that it's the same term in the Tibetan, but sometimes in context in English, different sentences just come together better, but they're the same term and they mean the same thing. It's kind of an English problem, not your problem. Karma. Okay, the question is, can you speak about the difference between dependent origination and karma?
Yeah. Teni ta karma yang li temjir kup du re. 템들 기 맙두위 karma yo mare. Karma zete nga tsu shirtang ke gewa tang mergewa. Kari yenna chik sakni zakchi ki gewa tang mergewa kang rongwa chik sakni. Tani to sem ki tokla wakchik vik songwa ti mangla karma ze ki yore. Yenna te sakpa te nga temdre la ragli yore ma toko mo karma sakya yang yo mare. Tani yang ten kongji ki pa te nga tsu tani sem ke sa jang rikpa kongji nam ki ke tokla karma wakchik te vik yore. Tip shirna ne tani tere. Tani maung pa na ti li te lap teni ne karma te lap teni ti mrivu maung pa dewa tang dungar karong chik jong kare. Shirtang deduk yo tsat tam che ter ngung ke karmi wang tab shikya yo mare. Khwen na tsen di tokla yang rang ke tanda ta kerang ke poison chik zab shikna kyo na kare. Yen nang li ki goni kyo ngi par ta za gwi ngi pa yo mare te. Tam char ke king ke wang kare. Yen na yang nga tsu tani dewa dungar maangpo chik ngami kewar ngami li tang derwa yore. Gyo tang ken tsen di toklam derwa yore tang kewar ngung ke toklam derwa yore. Tadi ke jirken maangpo chik lap teni tani karma tang karma lap teni li te lap teni sa nga tsu dewa tang dungar fyong kyo pate li te mena tip dewa tang dungar mamchong ware. Tip shenab de duk tamche li ke jisum rang kyo pate nang pi tere. Ter temde de ze ten cham rewa jong wi goni ter nang kyo re ze tere. Khwen na nga tsu shiror kur ngubo tamche diyang teri rwa. Tsekang naktsal tamche. Me toko ketsal tamche. O tamche ni tamche te korang rana sosu gyotang ken la teni fyong kyo re. Nga tsu dewa tang dungar zaya teng gyotang ken la marten ni daga chik yungwa chik kanyang yo mar. Tsen di gyotken la ten onanda, yang na ngang karmi gyotken la ten onanda, tendi finim derwa tup kyo res.
Dependent origination is the mechanism of karma. So karma would actually be categorized as dependent origination. So karma means action. And it has the implicit sense of an action, whether it be positive or negative. We call these defiling actions, actions that cause us to produce samsara, that those actions are then causes that produce future results. So we engage in an action, and then we are imprinting our mental consciousness with a habit, a habitual imprint. And then we're accumulating habitual imprints in dependence upon and in relation to which is the word dependent origination. Later, we have a resultant experience of that. It manifests as our experience. And so we have the ground of all ordinary experience, our mind that is conscious and aware. And then we engage in actions, and the word action is karma, which is then we're imprinting our mind with habitual imprints. And then eventually in the future, when the conditions, the dependence at that time comes together for those to ripen, then we have experiences of happiness or suffering. And so then all happiness, in general, we speak about happiness and suffering being the result of previous actions, but sometimes it's not totally karmic in the sense of it's the literal result of actions that have to ripen in that way from previous lifetimes, because we also have to take into account the causes and conditions of what we're doing right now. So take, for example, if you eat poison, something that's poisonous, and you get sick, that's the effect of the poison, not the karmic result of the poison. So you can experience the effect of causes and conditions right now. That you ate the poison or got sick over the poison might not be like 100% karmic, like it has to be the result of previous actions. It could be the mistake of having eaten it right now. The karma didn't necessitate that you eat the poison. So you have like causes and conditions from previous lifetimes, which we call karmic, those habitual imprints, but you also have the causes and conditions of right now, but all of that is dependently originating, is interdependence, the tendril. So then they're related, and kind of like karma is dependent origination. It's like an aspect of it in that from this perspective. And so we take into account the causes and conditions of previous lifetimes, but we also take into the account the causes and conditions of right now and the effect of the immediate conditions, which isn't necessarily 100% karmic. But it is dependently occurring. It is dependent origination in either case, in both cases. And so then the experience of like either pleasure or pain didn't come about from no causes, and it didn't come about from something that doesn't cause it, from a cause for something else. Like it's not its cause. Does that make sense?
No.
Human means
No.
So for example, you couldn't have a cause for one thing cause something else. Like this thing is not the result of that thing.
Your
so it can't come from that cause. So it can't
come
come from no cause, and it can't come from a cause that is not its cause. There. I said it. So those are two things that are always the case with whatever we experience. They're always dependently occurring. But one cause cannot also create everything. That's another aspect of that. So in this way, everything that occurs and all of our experiences are dependent upon the causes and conditions. And that's called dependent origination. And that is the same. So that's the mechanism in which we experience happiness and suffering. And some of it is literally karmic, and some of it is more conditional in this life, and it depends. But it's both dependently occurring. And that is the same as a mechanism or operating system for the entire universe. Like nothing occurs without being dependent upon its causes and conditions. The trees, the flowers, the natural environment, everything is dependently occurring. So too, all of our experiences, our happiness and our suffering are dependently occurring in dependence upon their causes and conditions. That's why we want to think about what causes and conditions are we accumulating. Because and then also that we've previously accumulated that's ripening in this life. And then what are we accumulating in this life that's going to then affect us in the future? What causes and conditions are we producing for future results? So that's what I was saying earlier when I said the wisdom of relative reality. That's this right here that understands that mechanism of cause and result. And we study how are things dependently occurring? What produces what? And the wisdom begins to discern that. And then we know what do we want to do and not do. What's our path? And that wisdom prevents us from going on a path that's going to produce unwanted experiences and going on the path that's going to, result in what we want or wish for. And so then that is the connection between the two.
These days, we even Buddhist people, they are not follow the wisdom, real wisdom. Because there is some things, sometimes their feelings are good and they follow the feelings. They just seems like they just enjoying any retreat for the feelings.
We're going to retreats because of how it feels.
It's pretty amazing. And
that's a sign that we really don't have wisdom. This understanding, the kind of topic of what it is that we want to adopt and practice and what it is that we want to refrain from. Because this wisdom is necessary if we want to experience peace and well-being. Which is what we want, right? So we need to know how do we produce that. So that's where we're going to stop the teachings for today.
Then many people, maybe some people good night or some people good morning. In this world, as independent is different. So thank you.
And then, I'll do it after dedication. There's a we when I was looking for materials in my computer yesterday, I had made a topical outline for the Heart Sutra, and it has all the lists and categories, and it'll just make it a lot easier for you to follow the teachings. And so, since we now have this learning management system on our website, and everybody is registered, if you sign in and go into your learning box for the Heart Sutra, this is there for you, and it will be very helpful. So I want to encourage everyone to use that. We just put it in today or yesterday, so it's new. Okay, now we
Oh,
can
it's okay.
dedicate
So
the merit.
nương đi tam chế dịch ba nhé tông
Tam
nê
ne
nhé
nye
bê
ben
đà nam
ranam
bám
bam
chế
je ne
kê
nye
gà
ga na
nan
je
chế
ba
ba lon
lon
trục
chung
bài
bai.
Tsö
Si be
bên
zo
thô
lin
linh rô
ro
wa
wa
đô
ro
var
sho.
chô kê wa
Wa
con
kun
đô
du
yang
yang
tơ
da
wa la
dam
ma
ma
tan
dam
đar
dam
mê
mi
chú
chin
kê
jim ba
khoa
la
la long
long
chô
chu chin.
chang sa
Sa
ta
da lam
lam
ki yun
yon
te
tan rat
ran zo
zo nê
ne du
đô
e
jê
je
chang
jang di.
kê quang
Ko
ba
ba
nhớ
nyar
tô
to.
chô. Thank you.